The Duchess and the Spy. It was 1944, and London lived in a strange state of suspended glamour. The war loomed like a gray fog over everything, yet behind the velvet curtains of aristocratic mansions, the clinking of crystal glasses and strains of classical music still echoed in defiance. At the center of this curated chaos was Margaret Campbell, the Duchess of Argyll. Margaret was unlike the other noblewomen of her time. She was sharp as crystal, with a beauty that turned heads and a tongue that could cut silk. With her auburn hair pinned in soft curls, lips always stained a classic crimson, and a scent of violet perfume that lingered long after she left a room, she was magnetic. Yet for all her gowns, pearls, and titled invitations, she was desperately, achingly bored. Her husband, the Duke, had grown distant, wrapped up in political dealings, social posturing, and, as she would later discover, other women. He spoke to her as though she were a vase, elegant, ornamental, and entirely silent. It was during one of these wartime charity galas, an opulent affair masked as goodwill, when Margaret first saw André Dupont. Tall, with olive skin and dark eyes that shimmered like secrets, he didn't look like the British officers she was used to. He moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, tailored perfectly in his Allied Forces uniform. Introduced as a translator working with the French resistance, he bowed gently when their eyes met, and in a low, accented voice said, "You wear loneliness like pearls, madame." That was all it took. In the weeks that followed, they exchanged letters slipped beneath teacups, met in dimly lit art galleries under the guise of philanthropic planning, and wandered through Kensington Gardens as if they were merely old friends. Margaret's world, once gray and cold, bloomed into something dangerous and thrilling. She began to wear color again. She smiled more. Her staff whispered, but never dared to speak aloud what they suspected. What she didn't know, at first, was that André was not merely a translator. He was a covert operative embedded in London, working with resistance contacts to expose Nazi collaborators operating under diplomatic immunity. The man who traced the curve of her cheek with shaking hands at midnight was also decoding radio messages by candlelight and passing names along to MI6. She became involved, not just romantically, but politically. Margaret used her access to Britain's elite to invite certain guests to her tea parties, diplomats whose hands weren't as clean as they claimed. She listened, flirted, charmed, and when the time was right, she'd excuse herself, hand André a slip of folded paper sealed with lipstick, and return to the drawing room as if nothing had happened. They met in secret cottages, country inns, and the back wing of her own estate. One afternoon, as rain tapped lightly against the glass, Margaret sat wrapped in a silk robe while André read poetry to her in French. She knew it was reckless. He was engaged to a wealthy French heiress funding the resistance, and she, still married, still watched, still a duchess. But in those rooms time dissolved. He called her ma reine, my queen. She called him mon feu, my fire. One night, after a particularly risky encounter at a party filled with foreign dignitaries, Margaret and André escaped to a seaside villa lent by an artist friend. As dawn approached, they lay tangled beneath linen sheets, watching waves crash against the cliffs. "After the war," she whispered, "what happens to us?" André didn't answer. Instead, he traced the line of her collarbone with his finger and said, "After the war, the world won't deserve you." But reality has a cruel way of crashing in. The Duke hired a private investigator. He had grown suspicious of Margaret's new energy, her extended charity weekends, her sudden interest in political figures she once found tedious. One evening, as Margaret and André shared a final kiss goodbye in a countryside cottage, flashbulbs went off. Photographs were taken. The evidence was undeniable. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The Duke filed for divorce. Whispers swirled across high society like perfume in a ballroom. The Duchess is compromised. The Duchess is a spy lover. The Duchess betrayed her station for a man with no title. Margaret was discreetly banned from certain events. Some women stopped speaking to her, some envied her, others secretly admired her. And André? He vanished. Some claimed he returned to France and married the heiress. Others believed he died during a covert mission in Belgium. A few whispered that he was captured and never heard from again. Margaret never confirmed or denied any of it. Years later, long after the war, when Margaret was old and somewhat forgotten, a set of love letters was discovered in a hidden drawer of her writing desk. They were tied with a faded ribbon, each envelope sealed with her kiss. One read,
"Ma reine, if the world were fair, I'd be your king, and we'd dance every morning with sunlight in our eyes. But I am only your shadow now, always watching, always loving, yours in every life."
In her memoirs, Margaret wrote only one line about him.
"There are men one marries, and men one burns for. I chose the fire."
So, what do you think? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Until next time, take care.